well. Let's welcome in our powerhouse panel on this Thursday morning. We start with attorney and Republican strategist Erin Elmore with us. Radio host and Project 21 National Advisory Board member Christopher Arps is here, and from the Independent Women's Forum, former New York Congresswoman Nan Hayworth here as well to learn more about this shooter. There are a lot of data points that we have now that we didn't have a day ago. Whether or not these are red flags, I think if you isolate any single data point, the answer is no. But they start to paint a picture about who this 18-year-old was. He apparently was isolated during COVID, not a good student, did not graduate or was not scheduled to graduate from high school this Friday. We heard about the Buffalo shooter who was also isolated during COVID. Again, apparently, the shooter here in Texas would cut his face. He was frequently known to have a BB gun and fire at people at times. He posted pictures of guns on social media and said, "These are the guns that I want to own." He played a lot of video games, which again doesn't make him a future school shooter. Kids made fun of him at schools. Apparently he did not wear, nice clothes. He wore kind of raggedy clothes and he had a lisp and he was made fun of. Shooter worked at Wendy's, but by no means seemingly had the money to afford something like that. There are just a lot of questions. Erin, good morning. Great to have you back on. Do we need to completely rethink how we go about securing schools?
I mean, gun-free school zones are part of the problem here. Since we've had those laws initiated, I believe, in the 90s, we've seen a total influx in these kind of shootings. And a lot of these schools now are sending letters to parents across the country saying, make sure you speak with your children and make sure there's no disinformation. What I would like to say to these schools is, how are you going to protect our children, whether with firearms or locking doors? I know that this person who did this in Uvalde walked in through an unlocked door. Yeah. And now is the time for reflection. And now is the time to hold our children close and just sympathize and empathize with the people in Uvalde, Texas, because what they're going through is unspeakable. But I do believe that schools have several duties and several obligations to keep their children safe, whether it's armed guards or locking these doors or special security, and also mentoring these lost students. No child should slip through the cracks. You can't just lose one. There should be none. And right now it's the time to reflect upon these terrible moments and terrible tragedies and keep politics out of the equation. The people that were so quick to judge and politicize, like our president, Joe Biden and Beto O'Rourke, are opportunists, and it's a true testament to who they are as men.
The lieutenant governor of Texas, Erin, to your point, said that schools should have one entrance and one entrance only once the school day begins. Take a listen.
We've got to, in our smaller schools where we can get down to one entrance might be one of those solutions.
Erin, your reaction to that?
Wow. I mean, it's troubling and sad when families are just looking for their children. This crime scene was so austere and terrifying that the parents couldn't even identify their children by looking at them. Imagine that as a mother. I can't even imagine. Yet you have the talking heads at CNN and MSNBC, and you see people on social media pushing for gun control or comparing this to abortion or taking a moment to get ratings or gain political points. And honestly, it's a testament to who these people are as a person and how truly they do not care about other human beings. They do not care about the greater good of society. They care about politics and optics. And I hope that they will be judged sharply and swiftly and severely, whether it's in ratings or in re-elections, because the American people and the grieving parents and the sympathetic and empathetic parents across the country deserve better.
Great points.
This is sick, and it shows you how unwell people are and how opportunistic they are, and not in a good way.
Yeah, and how do you protect against this kind of evil like this, Nan? Always, we'll check in with you in just a little bit, but appreciate the analysis. Thank you. All right, let's welcome in our powerhouse panel this morning. We start with attorney and Republican strategist Erin Elmore. Even for somebody as politically opportunistic as Beto O'Rourke, who ran for the presidency, failed to get the nomination, ran for the Senate in Texas, lost to Ted Cruz, and is now running for governor in Texas, and he is down in every single poll. So this move, if you're telling me this is not to help his campaign out, so he's got a soundbite for future ads over the next 5.5 months in Texas, this was shocking. But he interrupted a press conference yesterday. Governor Greg Abbott was addressing families. These families were there to hear logistically what the next several days are going to look like as they try and figure out what happened here. Families were crying as this was happening. Just talk about picking the wrong moment, but it's pretty unbelievable. Take a look.
Sit down and don't play this stuff.
Next shooting is right now, and you are doing nothing.
No, you need to get his out of here. This isn't the place to talk this over.
This is totally predictable when you...
Sir, you're out of line.
Aldi, what the town is going to look like over the next several weeks as a result of the investigation and that sort of thing. And here's Beto O'Rourke trying to have his Second Amendment moment.
I mean, Beto O'Rourke and the other partisan political hacks who are using a moment of tragedy to try to gain status and stature and influence policy will be judged harshly. They should be judged harshly. This is so classless and so heartless and shows a complete lack of compassion or caring. And I do believe that people like Beto and even Joe Biden, who went on television to use the Lord's name in vain and push a partisan agenda during a time of tragedy, will be judged harshly.
We've got Joe Biden yesterday said that the Second Amendment isn't absolute. If we could grab that soundbite, team in the back. He also said that in 1776, if you had the money, you wouldn't be able to buy a cannon. Again, this is just, and nobody talks about this when the president says it, but take a listen, then we'll get some reaction.
Second Amendment's not absolute. When it was passed, you couldn't own a cannon.
Okay, let's begin with our powerhouse panel. For more, we start with the Republican strategist and friend of the show, Erin Elmore, National Advisory Board member for Project 21, Christopher Arps.
Are we going to stand up to the gun lobby?
We need some really drastic action here. We need a moratorium, perhaps, on gun sales. Oh, you can't say that. Well, why not?
Erin, your take on that?
I mean, he's just a left-wing zealot, and there's nothing much to say or to give it life. But I think what's going on right now is showing how weak of a leader that Joe Biden is. You need to see strength in leadership in a time of crisis, and that's not what we're seeing here. And when he gave that speech, it was the night, just moments after this terrible, terrible tragedy.
Still daylight.
Parents,
yeah.
Parents were
5 hours later.
Maybe even less, right, Rob? And parents were scrambling to find their children, to identify their children. And we have a president, in name only, who went on television and started talking about politics. That is not leadership. That is not bravery. That is not compassion. It is partisan hackery, if that's even a word. And I do believe that he and others who went straight to politics and straight to the Second Amendment will be judged harshly. And by the way, they should be judged harshly. Beto O'Rourke should be judged harshly, because now is still not even the time to talk about politics.
Yeah.
Let's talk about these victims and their families and what they can do to heal. And you will never properly heal from losing a child, but to at least move forward with compassion and class and integrity as opposed to partisan nonsense.
I wish that and I apologize for my voice this morning. I'm a little under the weather, but I wanted to be here just because there's so much going on. I apologize for that. No, and thank you for bearing with me. So here's the moratorium on guns, and I watched the interview, and I want the reporter to say, "Well, hold on, Michael. Can you?" And Michael Moore came out with that movie 20 years ago, Bowling for Columbine, after the 1999 tragedy in Columbine, Colorado. But I wish he said, well, how does that play out? Because to me, it reminds me of mask mandates. Reasonable. If somebody comes out with a politically reasonable solution that both parties can get behind, even in a moderate way, I think we'll see actionable change. But so far, a moratorium on guns in the Second Amendment, I don't think is
It's unconstitutional, by the way.
Great point. You're the attorney. Yeah, absolutely. Chris, final thought. Please. Lockdowns, mandates. You think they might all be connected? You think that's why people are arming themselves in this country with what's going on? I think that's a topic. Go ahead.
I think that people are arming themselves because during the BLM riots and the defund the police movement, when this crime was moving from cities to suburbs and rural communities, people felt that the police were not going to protect them.
Exactly.
So they had to protect themselves.
You know, Steve
and that
Kerr
just shows another lack of leadership in our government in liberal cities.
Yeah, everyone had that Steve Kerr soundbite, and they were like, what a hero. Blue check marks were applauding him everywhere. And it's like, this is a guy that 2 years ago marched with parents and students that wanted to defund police in schools in Oakland. And everyone yesterday is like, oh, he's a real hero. It's like, please. The latest out of Texas this morning and throughout the day here on Newsmax. But we want to catch you up on some other stories that are grabbing our attention this morning. Let's welcome back the Powerhouse panel, Erin Elmore, Nan Hayworth, and Chris Arps. Erin, Dr. Jill Biden, who got an EED in education online at the University of Delaware, addressed the baby formula crisis yesterday. She says, Erin, that food is love. Listen.
I've always said that food is love, but food is life too. And I've been heartbroken to hear the stories of parents searching for formula. As a mom and a nana, it's impossible to hear the stories of children suffering and not imagine your own children in the same position.
What are you talking about?
Between her, Kamala, and Joe, it's hard to understand and ascertain anything that they are saying. But this suffering is at the hands of her husband. They closed that Abbott lab in February and did not reopen it, and very well could have. When the United States of America has to show on the news helicopters and airplanes bringing in formula, we are the greatest nation in the world, yet we have to go to Europe for formula. This shows you that America is sadly on a hegemonic decline unless we make massive changes and make them quickly. By the way, I was lucky enough to be able to get my son's formula when he was a baby from Germany because I saw that the American formula truly was subpar, and I found a way to import it. And I'm very, very, very lucky. But a lot of parents don't have that ability, and now they have nothing. And our formula here in America also, that this should be a moment to try to reform what we're having, because the formula here is all made basically by a few companies with various products that aren't the most top notch. So honestly, this should be a moment where some conservative people in office reform what is in our formula, loosen the laws so you can get formula from any country across the world, and realize that these labs shouldn't have been closed, that Abbott shouldn't have been closed. We need to make sure that our children have formula. We need to make sure that we have low price gasoline, and we need to make sure that we make major changes. And whether that's through an election process or otherwise, these politicians' feet should be held to the fire. And Dr. Jill, your speech was terrible, sad, pathetic, and you should have a little more responsibility. And God bless you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a little under the weather today, but doing just fine. I wanted to be here with everything going on. Chris, your take on that. Food is love. I don't understand why the administration doesn't just say, whether it's Joe Biden or whether it's the Health and Human Services Secretary, somebody get in front of a microphone and say, we understand you've been dealing with this for 4 months. We are going to solve this crisis now, instead of food is love, like she's Robert Frost up there reading poetry.